Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving right into a massive employment question, one that literally affects millions of job seekers and businesses every single year.
So, can a company outright refuse to hire someone with a disability? Well, the short answer is usually no. But, as with most things in the legal world, there are some very specific exceptions. We're going to uncover those together, looking at the hard facts, the nuances, and exactly where employment law draws the line.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the anti-discrimination rule, then define essential job functions, look at providing reasonable accommodations, explore the undue hardship exception and the direct threat defense, and finally, wrap up with interview and hiring rules.
All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, the anti-discrimination rule.
The legal definition of a disability is actually incredibly broad. It's defined as a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits a major life activity. So yes, that absolutely covers visible conditions, but it also fully includes invisible ones, things like mental health disorders, chemical sensitivities, chronic pain, or episodic conditions like epilepsy. The whole idea here is for the scope to be as inclusive as possible.
So who exactly is protected by this? Well, it's super comprehensive. It covers job applicants, current employees, and even contractors. But here is the really fascinating part. It also protects individuals with a history of a disability, and even people who are just perceived as having one, regardless of whether they actually do. Bottom line, if someone falls into any of these categories, it's strictly unlawful to discriminate against them during any part of the employment process.
Moving right along to Section 2, defining essential job functions.
This comparison right here is absolutely key to understanding the law. An essential function is a fundamental duty. Think of a commercial airline pilot. Strict visual acuity is absolutely essential for safety, right? But contrast that with a marginal function. Imagine a cleaning crew member who uses a prosthetic leg. They can perfectly do all the core cleaning tasks, but maybe sweeping a specific set of stairs is painful for them. In that case, sweeping those stairs might be a marginal function that can easily be reassigned to someone else. The crucial takeaway here is that a company cannot refuse to hire someone just because a disability prevents them from doing a non-essential marginal task.
And employers can't just arbitrarily decide what's essential on a whim. They have to follow official ADA guidelines. They look at concrete evidence, like the specific amount of time spent performing a function, the actual work experience of past or present employees, or the real-world consequences of not doing it. It's got to be based on facts. Okay, let's head into Section 3. Providing reasonable accommodations.
So what does a reasonable accommodation actually look like in the real world? It covers a huge range of modifications. We're talking about physically modifying workspace equipment, offering part-time or flexible work schedules, or maybe reassigning someone to a vacant position if they can't do their current job anymore. It could even mean providing readers or sign language interpreters. Basically, these are just adjustments that remove workplace barriers. It levels the playing field so the applicant can show off their actual abilities.
Now, how do you figure out the right accommodation? You use what the law calls the interactive process. It's simple. It starts with a request, moves to an informal consultation, identifies appropriate options, and then you just implement the solution. Instead of gearing up for a legal battle, this is meant to be a collaborative, informal back and forth. Both parties work together to find a feasible solution. It's really all about opening a dialogue rather than closing a door.
That brings us to Section 4, the undue hardship exception.
Okay, here is where we get into the exceptions. The law defines an undue hardship as an accommodation that requires significant difficulty or expense, or one that would fundamentally alter the very nature of the business. We aren't talking about minor inconveniences or routine costs here. If providing an accommodation causes a massive operational headache or a huge financial drain, relative to the company's size and resources, of course, then it's legally considered an undue hardship.
Let's look at a scenario. Imagine an experienced chef at a top-tier restaurant who needs to take leave for medical treatment, but they can't provide a fixed date for when they'll be back. Keeping a highly specialized, absolutely critical role open indefinitely without a return date, that significantly disrupts the restaurant's operations. The employer can't plan, and they can't permanently fill the spot. In a context like this, denying the accommodation of indefinite leave is totally justified because it creates an undue hardship.
But hold on a second. When we talk about the financial expense of an accommodation, there is a massive caveat. Before an employer claims something is just too expensive, they have to factor in tax incentives. For example, businesses can actually claim an annual barrier removal tax deduction of up to $15,000 for removing architectural and transportation barriers.
Plus, there's a work opportunity tax credit of up to $9,600 for hiring individuals from targeted groups, which absolutely includes people with disabilities. So the key takeaway here? Outside funding and tax credits can completely change the financial reality of what counts as a hardship. You have to look at the net cost to the business, not just the initial price tag.
All right, Section 5, the direct threat defense.
Let's explore another scenario. Say a small repair company is hiring a carpenter, and the job inherently requires using dangerous power saws. But the applicant has narcolepsy, a condition that causes sudden, unexpected unconsciousness. If a condition presents a significant risk of substantial harm that literally cannot be reduced by a reasonable accommodation, like our carpenter using power saws, the company is legally allowed to refuse to hire.
But here's the thing. Employers can't just play guessing games with safety. Evaluating a direct threat requires a really stringent objective review. You have to assess the duration of the risk, the nature and severity of the potential harm, how likely it is to even happen, and the imminence of that harm. The absolutely crucial point here is that this cannot be based on prejudice, stereotypes, or some generalized fear. It has to rely strictly on objective evidence and reasonable medical judgment.
Finally, let's wrap up with Section 6, Interview and Hiring Rules.
There is a very firm line drawn during the pre-offer stage of an interview. Before making an offer, an employer can ask, "Can you perform the specific job function?" But they absolutely cannot ask, "Do you need a reasonable accommodation to perform this job?" Why? Well, to protect applicants. Early interview questions have to focus exclusively on their actual ability to perform tasks, rather than trying to dig up hidden medical history.
However, the moment a real conditional job offer is on the table, the rules shift dramatically. At this post-offer stage, employers actually can ask disability-related questions and even require medical exams. But there is a huge catch. They can only do this if they do it universally for all entering employees in that specific job category. You can't just single people out. And it probably goes without saying, but any medical information obtained has to be kept strictly confidential.
So that brings us to our final thought. Is your workplace truly evaluating candidates based on their essential skills, or are you letting correctable barriers stand in the way of top-tier talent? Think about this carefully, because navigating these rules fairly doesn't just ensure strict legal compliance, it ultimately builds a stronger, more capable, and far more inclusive team for everyone. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I hope it helps you navigate this landscape a whole lot better.